Okay, shalom. We're going to continue on where we were at and backtrack a little bit, if we will. All right. Now, Ahaz, king of Judah, when Samaria fell. All right. Associated with the Assyrians. Edom invaded Judah during his era, murdered his son because he was dealing sadly with idols. We spoke before the camera had stopped. All right, so we want to continue live and continue moving. Blessed be the Most High. Hezekiah, king of Judah, who was the son of Ahaz, king of Judah and Israel. What we were explaining is that when the northern kingdom of Israel fell, you had, if you go to 2 Chronicles 30, you had it to where Hezekiah was telling the Israelites that were still in the northern lands to go to Jerusalem to keep the Passover. So he had rulership, if you want to use that word. He had rule over the Israelites that wanted to have any kind of respect for him. All right. So this is what we want to talk about. After the fall of the northern kingdom, there was no northern kingdom. It would have just been Hezekiah, who was still in the land of Judah. All right. Associated with the Ethiopians. We pointed out that he had an association with Taharka. Taharka is one of the kings of Dynasty 25 of Egypt. The Egyptians, because the Egyptians were under the rulership during the time of Hezekiah of Judah. All right. The Assyrians, we're talking about Sennacherib. Sennacherib actually made a stela or record, if we will, of going against Taharka. All right. In Babylon. What happened regarding Babylon during that time is Babylon was coming up as an empire while Assyria was fluctuating and beginning to fall on her own. All right. Now, Merodach Baladan was the king of Babylon during all of this era, during the era of Hezekiah of Judah. What sadly happened was he became too chummy in today's terms with, all right, the people of the Babylonians. That's why we read, never trust thine enemy. All right. So this is something we want to point out for reference purposes. Next, we have, and continuing this, thank you for the people who joined back on, Manasseh, wicked the end. That's really what I just was going to say about that. Manasseh was into witchcraft. Manasseh practiced a form of witchcraft called in the Hebrew Ob. Ob is where they get the terminology Obia from. So when people practicing Obia, that's not uncommon, sadly, from the ancient days of Israel. They practiced those kind of Markutim, as it says in the book of Exodus about the Egyptians and their secret arts. That was not uncommon. It's not to get sidetracked. If you know what happened with Balaam, when Balak hired Balaam in the book of Numbers, Shaphat is witch female. That's what Saul went to inquire, the witch of Endor. Because Shaphat Endor, or Endor, you understand? But now, witchcraft was not unknown in the era of ancient Israel. You understand? Balaam was a male witch, aka known as a wizard. All right? Manasseh was a witch, in layman terms. He was a murderer, in layman terms. Dealt with idols. And he is mentioned by Esarhaddon, as well as Ashur-bani-pal of Assyria. He, of all the kings of Judah, reigned the longest, from age 12 until age 67. So, and speaking about Manasseh, the grandson of Ahaz, the son of Hezekiah, we just can say wicked, the end. Okay, now, you have Jehoiachin, mentioned by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And we pointed out in part one of this part two presentation, he had issues with Moab. During the time of Jehoiachin, the Babylonians were having rule and influencing the Moabites in part to go against the children of Israel. So you're already speaking about the great-grandfather of Jehoiachin, king, or the great-great-grandfather, sorry, of Jehoiachin was Ahaz. You have Edom going in. During his great-great-grandson era, you have Moab going in. So in this presentation that we're talking about, brothers and sisters, all right, regarding history untold to the masses, regarding the Israelites, from Ahab all the way down, if we will, to Jehoiachin, that is what we're talking about, if we will. So, brothers and sisters, we want to continue on, if we will, all right, with the next particular part of this. All right. All right. We're going to read and discuss, let the book speak, in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1. And it reads on this wise. And some of these kings' names, if you were following, will register back into your mind because that's what we were already talking about. Right? It says this, Isaiah 1:1. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Let's go down to verse 7. Your country is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Your land, strangers devour it in your presence, and it is desolate as overthrown by strangers. And the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. Except Yah of hosts had left us a very small remnant, we should have been as Sodom, and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. Brothers and sisters, what we just read, Isaiah is giving the timeline of when he began to speak to the people in the name of the Creator. And it says in verse 7 of Isaiah chapter 1, your country is desolate, your cities are burned with fire. Brothers and sisters, we spoke about the invasion of the Assyrians, the Philistines, the Moabites, the Edomites, these different nations that were going into the land of Israel during this particular time. Now, Isaiah lived during the era when the northern kingdom was still a kingdom. Uzziah and Jotham were kings of Judah when the northern kingdom was still in existence, under the later kings that we mentioned, such as Menahem and Pekah and Hosea and so forth. Then in Isaiah 1, verse 1, it also mentions Ahaz and Hezekiah. We spoke about them as well. Ahaz and Hezekiah, we also, as stated, mentioned them as well. All right? And the daughter of Zion is left. Let's emphasize on that. Who is the daughter of Zion? Sisters, women, our queens, if you will. They are left forsaken, as it also says later on in Isaiah chapter 54. For more are the children of the unmarried wife than the married woman. Now, who that sound like, if you put it to even today's times? Who is mommy and daddy? And what community of what we're talking about? So when it says the daughter of Zion is left as a besieged city, everybody just comes and deal with the sisters just as they want. Besiege, no disrespect intended, means to enter and to go into, be it physically or mentally or spiritually. I was speaking with a good friend of mine about some roles, such as Hattie McDaniel, who had to play a maid in order to make it in that kind of show business. We spoke about this with my good friend of mine, about the characters that the lady Monique played in Precious, the character that Sanaa Lathan played in the role that she did when she just straight up disrespected her man, and so forth and so on, and was dealing with men of other nations. So now when we can take it, even say from a movie's perspective, which shows a sad reality, because this is not a fairy tale matter that we're hinting and talking about, right? It says what in verse 8? And the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. Sisters are left abandoned. That's what Isaiah is talking about. Jeremiah later on goes on to say, they say Peace, peace, where there is no peace, and heal the hurt of the daughter of my people. Rachel weeping for her children, as it says in Jeremiah. Rachel is the mother of Joseph. Joseph is the father of Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim was the capital of the northern tribes of Israel. So in Jeremiah, when it says Rachel weeping for her children, for they are not. Why were they not? Because they went off into the land of captivity. They forgot their resting place, worshiped the gods of the other nations, and the Most High took these nations and brought Israel under captivity. You understand? So that's what we want to talk about in that particular case. Let's go on. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 1, if we will, and see what it says in that part. Now, Jeremiah is about 60 years after Isaiah. The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests that were in Anatot in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of Yah came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. It also came in the days of Jehoiachin, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, until the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, until the carrying away of Jerusalem captive in the 5th month. Let's go down to verse 11. Moreover, the word of Yah came unto me, saying, Jeremiah, what seest thou? And I said, I see a rod of an almond tree. Then said Yah unto me, thou hast well seen, for I will hasten my word to perform it. And the word of Yah came unto me the second time, saying, what seest thou? And I said, I see a seething pot, and the face thereof is toward the north. Then Yah said unto me, out of the north an evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. For lo, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, saith Yah, and they shall come, and they shall set every one his throne at the entering of the gates of Jerusalem, and against all the walls of round about, and against all the cities of Yehudah. Brothers and sisters, so what happened with that? Jeremiah began to prophesy. We read the list of the king's names. The era of Josiah, southern kingdom we're talking now, because during the time of Isaiah is when the northern kingdom fell. So 60 or so years later, Jeremiah is around. The northern kingdom done fell. Hezekiah done passed away. Hezekiah, Manasseh, and then Ammon done passed away. So now we got Jeremiah talking about in the era of Josiah. Josiah is the grandfather of Jehoiachin, whom we spoke about earlier. So these are things, the timeline you just want to talk about. Babylon came against Jerusalem. After Babylon came against Jerusalem, you had the Greeks that came against Jerusalem. Then you had the Romans that came against Jerusalem. So these are things that we just want to point out for reference purposes. So when it says that the Most High will call all the kingdoms of the north, Babylon historically was ruling in Assyria, which is north of the land of Israel. Babylon land in Iraq is east of the land of Israel. But the Babylonians haven't already ruled in Assyria. By the time Jeremiah is on the scene, they're descending from the north upon them. And we know the Greeks from Europe were from the north against Judah. And then we know the Romans were also against Judah, and they came from the north. So you had Babylon, Greece, and Rome, all from the north, the kingdoms that came against Jerusalem/Judah. So these are things we just want to talk about and show for edification purposes. All right. Next, brothers and sisters, we have going into this Ezekiel. We're going to go to Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 1, and see what it says in that particular aspect. Right? Giving honor and praise unto the Most High. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were open, and I saw visions of Elohim. In the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of Yah came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the river Chebar, and the hand of Yah was there upon him. Ezekiel is one of my favorite prophets. Now, it says when they was in the land of the Chaldeans, Ezekiel was taken as a captive during the rule of Jehoiachin, king of Judah. When you go to the book of 2 Kings chapter 24. In last week's presentation, History Untold to the Masses, part 1, we spoke about the battle of Carchemish and recorded in the scriptures in 2 Kings 24, when Egypt just fell and so forth, and Assyria done fell, and Babylon came up as a power. Nebuchadnezzar was the son of Nabopolassar. Nabopolassar was not Babylonian as in being, saying, namely, a Hamite, but a Shemite out of the line of Arpachshad from Shem. Arpachshad is one of the sons of Shem. The Babylonians, as we call them, were really the Chaldeans ethnically that came against it. So what am I saying? The 11th dynasty of Babylon were Chaldeans. So you had Shemite nations, namely from the line of Arpachshad, that is where the Chaldean line, okay, will come from. They were ruling the Hamite Babylonians. Babylon started by Nimrod all the way back in Genesis, all right, in that particular case, if we will. So these are things we just want to go over and show for evidence purposes. According to Godfrey Higgins in his book, Anacalypsis, the Chaldeans were Negroes, just like in the book of Isaiah, when it talks about the daughter of Zion, that's sisters. When it says in the book of Isaiah, not to backtrack, it says, more are the children of the barren wife, of the unmarried wife. Sorry about that. The unmarried woman has more children than the woman who is married. What scenario are we talking about? You know how many times as a brother, I ask sister, do you see yourself being married? No. How many children you have? 2, 3? And this is not to slander, because I come from a single household, parent household. So this is something that when we're talking about the scriptures, we can know and understand what we're speaking of in that particular case. You understand? We, as the house of Israel, don't need a DNA test. Our signs, wonders, astonishment of heart, Deuteronomy 28 talks about. That's it right there. That's our code right there, Deuteronomy 28. The Most High said he will make it a sign upon thy seed. So we don't need a DNA test to prove who we are. All you got to do is look at the political, social, economic situation of, who people. Okay, so let's go on. In the book of the prophet Daniel, if we will, the book of Daniel, we're going to go to chapter 1, verse 1, in there and read what it says. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And Yah gave Jehoiachin, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of Elohim, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. Jeremiah, speaking about Babylon, says, they who plundered my heritage. The Babylonians, from the era of all we're talking about right here, which is equated to the 6th century BCE, dealt with Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Daniel now, mind you, brothers and sisters, it mentions King Jehoiachin. Jehoiachin, not to be confused with Jehoiachin, all right, is the son of Josiah. Jehoiachin or Jehoiachin is the grandson of Josiah. So we just want to point that out for reference purposes. The last righteous king that ruled in the land of Israel that was of any Israelite lineage, though it had been the southern kingdom, was Josiah. Josiah's sons and grandson, sorry, no disrespect in today's term, you dropped the ball. All right, so brothers and sisters, it says in the 3rd year of Nebuchadnezzar, that's not accurate in timeline. Brothers and sisters, Nebuchadnezzar was so much about besieging and attacking that we have to understand why Daniel 1 verse 1 and 2 says what it says. It says he carried out in part the vessels of the house of the Most High. in part. That means by the time we get later on in history, okay, into the book of Kings, when they just sat there and just burnt the temple, took everything out, that is something that we want to emphasize for edification purposes. Okay? Now, brothers and sisters, let us look. Hosea chapter 1, verse 1, if we will. All right? And it says this: the word of Yah that came unto Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, for edification purposes of what we were talking about and what we were speaking of. Right? If we go back to this list here, Jeroboam, the son of Jehoash or Joash, is from the dynasty of Yehu. So it's giving you, again, a timeline. Many people say, oh, the Bible is not a history book because a history book will have a date. Well, brothers and sisters, they didn't deal with BCE as we talk about now, or Anno Domini, or AD, or the Common Era, or CE. They dealt with a Regnal dating system, Regnal. The Egyptians did, the Ethiopians did, the Sumerians did, the Israelites did, the Akkadians did, the people Mitanni did. All of them dealt with a timeline according to rulers. It's called Regnal dating. That's why we wanted to go over that particular aspect of what happened with the kings and so forth and so on. So now let's go to Amos chapter 1, verse 1 and see what it says in here. The words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. Giving you a timeline. Tekoa is in the land of Judah, but he, Amos, prophesied to the northern kingdom of Israel. So we want to point that out. Actually, one of the kings of Israel told Amos to go back to where he came from. So they of the house of Israel in the north, later on in the southern kingdom of Judah, didn't really want to hear the word of the Most High. So what we need to do is take heed to the word of the Most High. Let's go to Micah chapter 1, verse 1. The word of Yah that came to Micah the Morashite in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Samaria, we pointed out, was the capital of the northern kingdom that Omri established. Omri, then Ahab, and so forth and so on, right? It then goes on to say in Micah 1, verse 5, for the transgression of Jacob is all this, and for the sins of the house of Israel. What is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what are the high places of Judah? Are they not Jerusalem? Therefore, I will make Samaria as a heap in the field, and as plantings of a vineyard, and I will pour down the stones thereof unto the valley, and I will discover the foundations thereof. Brothers and sisters, talking about that particular aspect in the fall of the kingdoms and what will happen within the land and so forth and so on, what we want to do for edification purposes is, in archaeology, show what happened. See, this is Samaria after the Most High done dealt with it in that particular case. All right? You see, this is what happened when it says Most High will tear down. Nothing grows from it like that. Looks like bare desert. As Leviticus 26 says, the land will repay its Sabbath while you did not keep the Sabbath of the Sabbatical time for the land. And here we see another part and aspect of what happened where Samaria was just dealt with in this particular case. Brothers and sisters, as we read in the book of Micah. All right? Want to see it again? Here it is. That's Samaria in part. Here is why that particular aspect happened. And that's what happened, because this thing can't save you. All right? You done made your own God in that particular case, which is ridiculous. And this is going to really hit the house of Israel. This is in Samaria. This was in Samaria, brothers and sisters. Can you please explain why is there an ark inside of where ancient Israel was at? That's straight up Egyptian. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 20. All right, so we can understand what it's talking about. And it says the following, Ezekiel chapter 20, and the first verse says this. And it came to pass in the 7th year, in the 1st month, the 10th day of the month, that certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of Yah, and sat before me. Then came the word of Yah unto me, saying, let's go down in verse 6. Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 6. In the day that I lifted up my hand unto them, to bring them forth of the land of Egypt into a land that I had espied for them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. Ezekiel chapter 20, 7th verse. Then said I unto them, the Most High saying to Israel, cast ye away every man the abominations of his eyes, and defile not yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am Jehovah, I am Yah, thy Elohim. Ezekiel goes on to say they did not get rid of it. See, this is why you find in Sumerian archaeology Egyptian ox and Egyptian images. You know, that's like one of the Egyptian idols right there, found in Samaria. And here we see, brothers and sisters, and we want to point this out for edification purposes. Remember, we spoke in part 1 of this part 2 series of History Unknown to the Masses? This from Samaria with the era of Ahab. That is straight up Phoenician. Phoenician people were the same ones with tribes of Israel among Canaanites that went, as we talked about, to Carthage, to Tunisia. So you had the influence of the Zidonians of Canaan coming from that. Then you had the influence of the Egyptians coming from that. And then Israel playing, no disrespect intended, the harlot among the nations. It says that the nations backed up in Ezekiel chapter 23, and Israel was left to deal sadly with the iniquity. Israel is meant to not dwell among the nations. That is even what the witch, you understand, Balak said. I behold Jacob, a people not reckoned among the nations. That's in Numbers chapter 22, chapter 23. But Israel wanted a king like everybody else. So, brothers and sisters, sadly, what happened is the Most High gave you king. Wicked, 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 unrighteous, 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 and unrighteous. Because you know, there was not one righteous king of the northern tribes of Israel, and of the southern tribes or the southern kingdom, out of say 20 kings, there was only 6 righteous. So that means you have 14 for sure that were wicked that came out of the southern kingdom of Israel. You got 20 or 19 wicked in the north, and then you got 14 that was righteous in the south. Brothers and sisters, your wickedness outseated your righteousness. That is why these prophets came along to talk to the house of Israel. But they didn't want the one, as the book of Amos said, that reproved at the gate. You understand? So let us continue, brothers and sisters, and close out in the book of Zephaniah, chapter 1, verse 1. So we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. The book of the prophet Zephaniah, chapter 1, verse 1, and it says this. All right. The word of Yah, which came unto Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hilkiah, and the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah. The timeline. This is during the southern kingdom, brothers and sisters, of Judah, is during the time of Zephaniah the prophet. Brothers and sisters, these are things that we want to go over. Let's conclude that particular part, all right? We wanted to go over and talk about this kind of subject and this kind of matter. The dynasties that happened, the influence of these other nations in their gods, and how it's shown in archaeology in parts, and how the word of the Most High came to pass as he spoke about the aspect of Samaria, and closing this out with Jerusalem. I've heard it from more than one viable source. Sorry, viable source. The Jerusalem that they show on Channel 7 News, Channel 4 News, that image that they show with the Dome of the Rock is not the Jerusalem that David, Solomon, and even the prophets saw. That land that they talk about on the news as Jerusalem is really in the land of Ephraim in ancient days. And the real Jerusalem is further south. I've asked Israelites from Dimona, which is in the land of Israel, about this. I've asked Israelites who've been to the land of Israel about this. It says in Jeremiah that the Most High would take Jerusalem and flip it upside down as one does a dish. So, brothers and sisters, our land, one, is not in the west, it's in the east. And it is, as shown in Samaria, those pictures, it is repaying the Sabbath according to the prophecy from Moses in Leviticus 26. We have to return back to Yah, the creator, maker of heaven and earth. Brothers and sisters, again, I want to apologize. This presentation was expected to be done at 8 p.m. last night. Unfortunately, due to one reason or the other, it was done tonight. I also want to apologize because I had to break up the presentation, this being History Untold to the Masses Part 2. So there will be a Part 2A and a Part 2B. Subscribe to the channel. Again, subscribe to the channel, brothers and sisters, Shomrei Habrit, and I'm going to put their video in the description of both A and B of this presentation tonight. All right. Shalom Lakem. For those who know, you can contact me at the telephone number. I'm going to state it, 908-587-4841. 908-587-4841. Call or text. Shalom. Most High bless. One more thing, please. I want to show, if you look at the thumbnail on the videos, I want to, on a human level, give due respect to the sister who does these flyers for me. Her Facebook name is Fab Aim, Fabaim. You can inbox her, and she does video editing, flyers, and so forth. All right? Fab Aim, Fabaim on Facebook. Okay? Now, in the future, as we stated earlier on this channel, we're going to do a presentation about the Shabbat or Sabbath. Is it a monthly or weekly event? Is it a matter of the lunar cycle, daily cycle, weekly cycle? And we will discuss that. Stay tuned to the channel, subscribe to it, comment, like, share. Let me know what you think. If you're disrespectful, you will be blocked from the channel and your comment will be removed. By disrespect is not disagree. Disrespect is using profanity, if you will. All right, so you just want to point that out for reason and purposes. With that, shalom.